Hello, it's me. I'm back. Welcome to the presentation. It will begin shortly. AKA in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Alright. Story starts off with these boats. Alright. Hold on. So they're all up in this area. Well, yeah. This is used to be this is Great Lake Storm in 1913. We'll get into more of the lore later, okay? But let's just get right into it. Okay, this is the J.H. Shield, James Carruthers, Wexford. They're all up here. It's November 7th, 1913. Okay, they're gonna go from here to there. The suit, alright? Same time, this boat, aka the Hydrus, is gonna load from here, and then they're gonna go all the way down here. All right, nothing bad happened yet. Right, good. Okay, wait till a couple hours later. Lake Huron wise, the Regina loading down in this area. Okay, a couple other boats are loading coal. Now, no, Regina is a package freighter, but we'll get to more about the boats later. This is the Argus. Of course, Johnny McGean, Isaac M. Scott, Charles S. Price. They're all on Lake Erie, loading coal, and they're going to go up through this river and go up into Lake Huron, and we'll get there. Anyway, Sandusky, Cleveland, they're all going to go up. We're still pretty early on in the timeline, aka we're November 7th, November 8th area, because it's not that bad, but it's about to get worse for this boat right here, the LC Waldo. You see, it's loading from the same place the Hydrus was before, right? But a day can really make the difference, because they're gonna start a day later. Not the smartest idea, because this is when the storm would come up and wreak havoc on Lake. All right, but we'll get to more on that later. This is basically the map. Now, I'm not a weatherman, so I'm perplexed, but this is the original storm, right? And then another one comes in from the Rockies, and they basically converge over in this area right about here on November 9th. And that's when all the havoc starts. But remember, we're still in the beginning stage. We're November 8th, I think. The Lee Field is gonna come up from the Sioux and make its way up to where the Wexford, Carruthers, and Cheadle left before, and just vanish off the face of the earth. We'll get to more on that later, though. It's more like it was stuck on some rocks. I think the last time someone saw it, around Fort William, which is Thunder Bay. Yeah. And it's just not been found since. Lake Michigan. As you thought we couldn't get worse. This is the Louisiana. It's got a wooden hull. It's one of those old ones, built in the 80s, the 1880s. So it's going to make its way up Lake Michigan, and oh no! The storm kicks in, and they run aground. Now, the issue with this is it's very blinding snow, pretty bad wave, and you ran aground on rocks. And then it makes it an even worse situation when someone smells smoke. And where there's smoke, there's fire. So the crew literally had to get off the boat, get on land, and walk through the very heavy snow. And the Louisiana ended up just burning completely to the water line. I mean, like, literally the only thing that the crew saw was an engine, which hissed because water was going on it. And that's not the best for an engine. another interesting story was happening with this tug, the James Martin, and a Plymouth barge it was towing. It was having issues pulling the barge because it was taking on water itself. So it's like, oh, we gotta cut you loose. So they like cut loose around the same area where Plymouth, where Louisiana had its issues. Lots of boats had issues around this area in Lake Michigan. I don't know why. It's Door Island? Anyways, the Plymouth was never seen again, safe to say. After the storm, the Martin went out to look for it. It just vanished after it was last seen in the general vicinity. And then a lot of stuff happened. On Lake Huron, we've reached November 9th. Which is not a good day. Not a good day. Oh, hold on. Ugh, technical difficulties. Oh, we haven't reached that part yet. Never mind. The Regina. Still down here, right? Other boats. Still down here. They're all gonna go up there. And right when they get up there, they're gonna realize, oh no, the weather's changed. Which is where we get to about here. So now everything bad's gonna happen. The Regina, it's gonna sail out and get stuck somewhere in the lower part of the lake. The McGean was found around there. Charles S. Price was found upside down. There's three boats we'll talk about. The boats that came down. Isaac M. Scott vanished along with the Argus. All of them basically vanished around this area of the lake. But now let's talk about the ones that were coming from here, because that will have a significance, I believe. Well, in my opinion. Because some of these have not been found yet. Yay. And I will find, I guarantee you, I'm gonna go diving. I'm gonna look for some of these someday. Okay, so basically, the Wexford, they're coming down. Hydrus is coming down. Carruthers, the Sheetal, they're all coming down together, basically, right? They each just chilled in this around. I think they chilled in this area through the 8th because they saw the storm. They sat out through the first part of the storm, but the first part of the storm wasn't the worst part of the storm, because of course the other system came in from the west. So that's not fun. So they went out because obviously there was like a false break in the storm, and immediately realized, oh no, we are not in the best situation. So they're all coming down. And the Carruthers, I think, vanishes somewhere off here. The Hydrus is also Hydrus was near. The Wexford was spotted around this area. And the Sheetal, well, the Sheetal was the only one of these boats to make it through. There's like 8 on the slideshow. So yeah, that sucked to do that. Quick audio intermission. We have returned to action to talk about this storm. And we're getting on to the next. The Henry B. Smith. This boat basically was having issues being on time. This is the most genuinely regarded story of how the tail went down. So apparently the captain was threatened with his job because this boat right here, the Henry B. Smith, was late. So he forced people to work and like put it in the cars so he could leave sooner. So I think either on the 9th or the 10th, they decided to depart Marquette, Michigan, and they didn't make it very far. They vanished somewhere in this area. So basically, they didn't even make it that far. They were heading, obviously, for this way. They were spotted going this way and then turned back, and that's when no one saw them. And the last person who saw them was the captain of the Choctaw. Buffalo Lightship 82. Lightships are basically floating lighthouses, which is basically a definition because they couldn't build lighthouses at some point. Yeah, I guess. So basically, this ship just sits on like heavy weights, like hundreds of pound weights, outside of Buffalo. Obviously, as you can tell, it says Buffalo on it. And apparently, sometime during the storm, it was blown off of its course and was found somewhere up here, even with the hundreds of heavy pound weights. Now, there's an interesting story that goes along with that. We'll get back to that later, though, because we got to talk about our good old friends on the LC Volvo. They did not have the best of time, remember? They left from this area. They were planning on going here the day after the Hydrus was, but oh no, the storm kicked in right around this area. And then they lost the rudder. And then a huge wave decided to break basically the pilot house, so they had to run back to the back of the boat to the emergency steering. Now, the emergency steering is basically just another wheel at the back of the boat, and with a compass and a lantern and that, and they basically tried to sail. But then they ended up going aground on the Keweenaw Peninsula, and there's a heck of a lot to go with that story. Lots of the ship broke in half, and they all had to rush to the front, and they only got trapped with one can of tomatoes, and they had to burn wood in a bathtub and stuff like that. Not fun times, not fun. And they got rescued, but the rescuing ship had to constantly keep going back because the Coast Guard could not get to them in time. It was weird. So that went aground around here, and when they saw it, this is what it looked like, encased in ice. This is probably one of the most known pictures of the storm. Besides the picture we'll get to later. Alright, let's get to the sunken ships in this storm. Starting with the Lee Field. This boat right here. It was built in 1892. It was carrying steel rails, like railroads and stuff. It was 269 feet, so semi long. It was like one of those weird ocean going vessels that was on the lake. And as I told you, it just vanished up by Thunder Bay area, with all 18 crew being lost. Nothing of it's been found. No crew, no cargo, no boat, no nothing. So it's very weird. Here's an illustration. Here are a couple of pictures of it afloat, and here's an illustration of what it probably looks like, and obviously we don't know where it is. So, next boat. Here's a map. I know it's kind of hard to see. We're going to have an easier to follow map. The Henry B. Smith. We talked about it. It vanished off of Marquette, Michigan. It's carrying iron ore. It was built in 1906. 525 feet long, so it was a pretty long boat. It was just recently found in 2013. A whole century after the storm, happened. In 500, in around little over 500 feet of water, so not like the best, most survivable standpoint, with a loss of all 25 crew. There's, I think this is its launching. Some pictures of the float. Here are some pictures of it. Here's a pilot house over here. Name tag, obviously, so we know where it's from, Henry B. Smith. And I think this is one of the entrances to the cargo hold, although I'm not sure. It's at a weird angle. Map again. I don't know why. The Plymouth barge. It was a steamer. It got converted into a barge. 225 feet. I mean, it was built all the way back in 1854. So I mean, it's a very old boat. It's carrying lumber. There was a whole like legal thing happening with the Martin tug that was towing it. So there had to be a marshal aboard the barge because legal stuff. Yeah. Anyways, he wrote a note in a bottle that became one of the most famous things in this storm. And in my opinion, is one of the only true notes in a bottle. It seemed like it was written, well, by him somewhat. He had someone else write it, apparently. But yeah, it was lost, vanished, basically, around the Gull Island area. Next boat, Argus, built in 1903. Another one of those old boats. Changed names, which is not a good thing. Good thing was carrying coal. It was one of those boats coming up from the from Lake Erie through the up the river and then into Lake Huron. Yeah, it was lost. 436 carrying with a crew of 28. Well, 28 died around, and they vanished. Went down somewhere in Point Hope Parks. Now, for the next part, we're going to talk about Goderich, Ohio. Sorry, Ontario, which is a Canada coastal city to the Great Lakes, Lake Huron specifically. They had bodies on there because a lot of boats went down near there. And basically, the whole coastline was strewn with bodies. Some from this boat. They found a lifeboat from the Argus. So, yeah. This boat was a decade old. Next is the most interesting story from this boat, from the storm. The James Carruthers. 550 feet. It was new. As in new, I mean it was literally built the year it sank, 1913. It's brand new. The paint wasn't even dry yet, according to some sources. It's carrying grain, and it was coming through the Superior route, so it was going down, up, and then down through Lake Huron. It's vanished. It's also not been found. No one knows where it is. I mean, they thought they found it. It was just a limestone shelf. All 22 crew were lost. 22 to 28. Some sources differ. Idris. Another boat that changed names. It's a sister boat of the Argus. 416 feet in length. Also built in 1903. Was carrying iron ore from the Duluth area. And remember, it left the day before the LC Waldo left. So they avoided the first part of the storm entirely, said that they decided to sit, and then for some reason, they decided to go out. Now, this boat was recently found even sooner in the 2015. It's upright. Here's a couple pictures of it. It's the back of it, pilot house. The inside, which it's been sitting on the bottom of Lake Huron, which is not the best because there's lots of quagga mussels and stuff down there, which basically just cover the wrecks. They don't have those much in Superior, but the other lakes beg to differ. All are crew of 27 were lost. That one down near Goderich. It was spotted near the James C. Carruthers last, so maybe it's near. Maybe the Carruthers is near, and we'll find it soon. Don't know. Next is a boat I could hardly find a picture of. The John A. McGean. At a length of 452 feet, the John A. McGean, built in 1908, was another one of those boats heading up with coal from the Ohio area through Lake Erie, up Lake Huron, and then flipped. That's right, it was found upside down, just like the Argus was. They were both heading up Lake Huron, and they were both found upside down. They apparently stuck, and the propeller apparently was damaged of the McGean. So that was interesting. It was 5 years old when it sank. It's around once again, I saw differ between 22 and 28 lost, and that was found in, I believe, 1985. Next boat, one of the most famous of this storm, the Charles S. Price. The length of 524 feet was the boat found floating upside down. This was the Charles S. Price. This is probably one of the most famous images of this storm. It was another one of those boats carrying coal going up through Lake Huron from the Ohio coal mine in 1910, so it's 3 years old, and that went down near Port Huron, Michigan. They actually, with a crew of 28. A couple interesting stories. There was supposed to be 29, except for one of their assistant engineers just got cold feet before the storm kicked in, and he left the boat beforehand. He tried to convince a couple other people to leave. They didn't. Everyone ended up going down with the boat. It ended up basically settling to the bottom on November 17th. But it was found flipped, and they had to pay a diver to go down. And he read the name and he said, nah. When he came up, he didn't reveal it because he wanted to get his paycheck before he revealed it. But he revealed it was the Charles S. Price. Uh, you know, they basically took all of the equipment, most of the equipment out of her before she, settled. They tried to, with yeah. It didn't make it far from St. Clair. You've definitely, if you've heard anything about this storm, you've seen this image, though. There's a couple images of it afloat. And this is the only photo of the wreck that I could find. I mean, it literally says Charles S. Price, and it's from a documentary. So, yeah. The Regina is also popular along with the Charles S. Price because many conspiracy people thought that it ran into the Price. It did not, though. No, it was found upside down with a ginormous hole in it due to what many believe is running aground during the storm, a loss of all of her crew. She was actually built in 1907. She's a Canadian package freighter, floating UPS truck, basically. So she was down. She wasn't in Lake Erie, but she was at like the very bottom of Lake Huron, very bottom of Lake Huron, and she basically was going to go up the coast and bring people what they needed for the Christmas season because obviously nobody was going to go out. We're going to had a crew of 249 feet and was 6 years old in the storm. Next boat we've talked about before, the Isaac M. Scott. We talked about this because on its very first trip, it sank a boat on Lake Superior. Remember, we talked about the John B. Cowell situation? Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this, so if you want more info on the Isaac Sky, you can go back and watch that video. I will just give a quick rundown. The ship was 524 feet long, with a crew of 28. It was built in 1909, and it was one of the boats carrying coal from Ohio up through Lake Huron. It flipped upside down sometime in the storm, and it was found several decades later. Upside down, there's not much to see. All its superstructure is basically gone because the hull was sitting on top of it. As I said, it was built in 1909. It sank the John B. Collins first ever voyage. So that's not good. All crew 28, and it had the same captain at the time it went down. The last of the Lake Huron boats, the Wexford. Built in 1883, another one of those ocean-going vessels. That boat came from Lake Superior with the Carruthers, Hydrus, and Cheadle at a length of 250 feet. It was also carrying steel rails. What do you know? They tried to get into ports, but they weren't able to. They could the people on shore could hear the whistle, and obviously that vanished as the boat went down. I saw several sources say there was between 17 and 24 people on board. And there's an infamous photo I've seen on many of a Wexford crewman on shore in obviously like Wexford life jackets. They were some of the first people to be found. Yeah, they sank a couple miles offshore basically. The boat was found in 2000. All of its upper superstructure was gone. All the cabins were blown off in the storm. So, yeah, and here's some photos. What it looked like. Here's the inside of it. They turned it into a memorial, basically, and what they do is they go out there with with the relatives, because, I mean, this happened in 1913, so who knows how many of the parents of the people on board are actually still alive. And, they have a memorial service for them. Last boat we're going to touch upon, the sunken ones, Buffalo Lightship 82. Here's a couple pictures of it. We talked quite a bit about it. It was 105 feet. It was built the year before in 1912. Fun fact, they actually resurfaced it in 1914 and it began sailing again afterwards. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a boat that's been known to sink and carry its entire crew of 6 to death. But this is where the other note, which I think is true, came through. Apparently, supposedly, because we don't know if this is true or not, but apparently the captain wrote a goodbye message to his wife on a door, but entitled it to the wrong name. Alright. But I think the wife said something about it being an inexperienced crewman that wrote it. I don't know. We'll never know because all went down with the boat. Alright, let's talk about some stranded ships, because there was a lot of boats that ran aground in this storm, and we're only going to talk about a couple of them. The main ones. We'll start out with the Howard M. Hanna Jr. on Lake Huron. Ran aground. Literally, it ran onto a lighthouse. Like, it ran onto a lighthouse. It split in two. This is what it looked, a couple of view images of what it looked like. Smokestack fell down. Apparently, people used the coal, which the coal it was carrying was 500 feet in length. and 5 years old. It was basically just rebuilt in 1916, so 3 years after the storm, it started going back into service again. Next boat, the HB Hagwood. All good. Built in 1906. The wheelsmen basically saved the day on this one, and they just beached. It could have been way worse. They were the last boat to see several of the boats that sunk, aka basically they were the last boats to see many of the boats that were heading up the lake, like the Regina and the Charles S. Price and the Scott, the Wexford, I think they saw as well. 100% sure. He gave an interview in the 90s to Rick Mixter. About his harrowing tale through the storm. The boat was 556 feet long, 7 years old at the time. It was unknown what it was carrying, but it ran aground on a beach, and they basically just refloated it. And it said, there you go back into service. Alright, let's talk about some boats that ran aground basically right next to each other in the Washington Island area. The Louisiana and the Halstead. Now, there's only one picture here of the Halstead, and we talked about the Louisiana already. Halstead was a barge, 191 feet. It is this picture right here where my red cursor is on. 191 feet, built in 1873. It was carrying lumber when it ran aground on Washington Island. The Louisiana was 287 feet. It was built in 1887. At the time it crashed, it was empty. And obviously, it ran onto the island. I told the story earlier. The crew had to get off, and the boat burned to the waterline. In fact, this is all that's left of the Louisiana. Here's what it looked like. Basically, this and this are a far cry from each other. And here's the Halstead. Here's a picture. There's like this much. It's like 30 feet deep. Scuba divers go on it sometimes because it's hardly in the ground. Next boat we're talking about is the Turret Chief. 273 feet in length. Built in 1896, ran around near Copper Harbor, Michigan. It was rebuilt. Basically, it was taken off the rocks where it ran aground and be rebuilt the next year as the barge Salver, which ended up sinking. You're like, why are these wreck photos here? That's why. It sunk as a barge. Barge a couple years after, so that's not the best. Grounded vessels. Before we get to the grounded vessels, I want to talk a little bit more about the LC Waldo and what happened afterwards. It was rebuilt in 1916. Obviously, it needed to be rebuilt. Did you see what happened to it? It was the one covered in ice on Lake Superior, Keweenaw Peninsula. It was rebuilt in 1916, had a long life. But then, interesting story, on the way to get towed for scrap, it broke free in a storm and ended up sinking. So, it's somewhere, I believe in the Atlantic Ocean. Which is very interesting. Okay, here are some more grounded vessels. Fred G. Hartwell, the Huronic, sister ship of the Noronic, which burned in 1949. I'll have to talk about that sometime. J.T. Hutchinson, Major William Nottingham, which actually lost 3 crewmen. Scottish hero, Turret Chief L.C. Waldo, already mentioned, the Meaford. Halstead, Louisiana, Pontiac, Arcadian, another Lightship 61. The Matthew Andrews, Howard M. Hanna Jr., H.B. Hawgood, the J.M. Jenks, Matoa, D.O. Mills, Northern Queen, A.E. Stewart, which would be refloated and would sink in a collision like a decade or so later. W.G. Pollock, the Saxona, the Victory, the Donaldson Bars, the C.W. Eliquy, Fulton, Pittsburgh Steamship Company barges, and the G.J. Grammer. Here are some, which some of them were refloated. Basically, most of them were refloated. Some of them were total losses, like the Matoa. And here are the images of some of them. Here's a more, well, I mean, it's not really better map. Henry B. Smith right there. Here's the black things are the sunken ones, and the gray ones are the stranded ones. It's kind of hard to see on the map, but yeah. Where are the wrecks today? Well, Lake Huron has several. Argus, upside down. Hydrus, right side up. Charles S. Price, upside down. Regina, upside down. James Carruthers, nowhere to be found. John A. McGean, upside down. Isaac M. Scott, upside down. Wexford, right side up. Now I'm gonna get into my conspiracy. Alright. Alright, I'm known for this, so let's go. The boats coming from Lake Superior and going down the lake currently, because we don't know where the James Carruthers is, but they're all right side up. And the boats coming from Ohio and going up Lake Huron, coming from Lake Erie, are all flipped upside down. So, I don't know what happened in the storm. Maybe like the waves, they were going into the waves differently. But that's my observations. Other lakes, I mean, Lake Superior took the leaf field. No one has found it yet, even though it was last spotted around the rocks around Fort William, which is now Thunder Bay. Henry B. Smith found in 2013. It was right side up. It was, and the barge has not been found yet. They thought they found it, and then it turned out to be a different barge wreck, and then like Ship 82, refloated and scrapped a lot of decades later. And that's it. Thank you for listening to my documentary on this topic. Thank you for stopping by. We will be back, hopefully sooner than last time, with another shipwreck tale. And with better audio setup, sorry, and I'll actually stream it, because this is supposed to be streamed, and subscribe, like, and tell me some of your shipwreck tales that you want me to tell. I already got one in mind for next time, and speaking of which, see ya.